Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Designing Learning Activities to Achieve Student Outcomes. All right, so we'll start off with a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, at the end, so all phones are going to be muted during the presentation. At the end, we'll have time to take questions. We're also going to have active portions of this webinar where we'll ask for your ideas. So please go ahead and communicate with us through the chat feature for these portions, as well as any questions you might want to ask throughout the webinar. For any technical issues, go ahead and you can email us to the email on the screen or call 312-850-4744. Please note there might be a delay in advancing the slides, especially if there are graphics. And also, this webinar is going to be recorded. All participants and everyone who registered will receive a recording of this webinar. And a note about redeeming the CPDU, we are offering one CPDU for this. So in order to be eligible for that, participants need to fill out and return the Illinois State Board of Education evaluation form. That is one of your handouts on the sidebar. You also need to actively listen and participate for the entire webinar, and we'll need to have provided your IEIN number when you registered. For those that end up listening at a later point, you will also need to email that email on the screen, sarah.chusett@iphionline.org, to request an affidavit that is required as far as evidence of time spent on this activity. So once IPHI receives all the required documentation and information and verifies your participation, we will issue the evidence of completion hour for your CPDU. So the one speaking, that's me. I'm your moderator, and I'm going to be presenting today, Sarah Chusett, Program Manager for the Center for Policy and Partnership Initiatives, Illinois Public Health Institute. We've got some great presenters here today. Tom Rocco, who is a Pump Up PE trainer, will tell you more about that program. He's also a PE teacher at Oak Park Elementary School District 97. And we have Deb Vogel with us, who was a member of the state PE task forces. She led the revisions to the state learning standards on physical development and health. She is also an IAPERD member, that's the Illinois Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, and is a retired PE and health teacher. So our objectives today, we're going to explain backwards design and its connection to standard-based, high-quality, enhanced physical education. We're going to engage you in interactive backwards design practice, and we're going to provide guidance on continuing the backwards design and curriculum alignment work back in your schools and districts. And just a note, in order to understand and get the most out of this webinar, you will need to have watched the first in our series, Intro to Standards-Based PE Curriculum. You can see the link there on the slide. You can download the recording. And in that, we gave an overview of the state learning standards on physical development and health. We explained the standards continuum and provided guidance on that process to align your curriculum to the state learning standards back at your district. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Rocco, get us going with some information on high quality enhanced PE. Tom?
Good afternoon there. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is high quality enhanced physical education. First of all, it's characterized by standards-based instruction. We're looking to get MPVA for at least 50% of the class time. That's obviously moderate to vigorous physical activity. So if I got a 30-minute class, I'm looking for at least 15 of those minutes to be moderate to vigorous activity. Once again, we also want to make sure we're following the appropriate instruction practices. We also want to make sure our lessons are developmentally appropriate, and we are providing our students with skill development opportunities as well. This next slide talks a little bit about the return on investment. I always during our Pump Up PE trainings, I like to tell our attendees that this is always a great slide to share with administrators, community members, teachers, parents in their buildings, because it really shows what the return on investment on a good high quality enhanced PE program will provide. You're going to get better learners. You're going to have students that are showing better, achieving higher in their ability in the classroom, and their cognitive performance will go up. It's going to lead to better health, so better physical fitness, reduced risk of disease, less stress. And then, as always, those homeroom classroom teachers, principals, they love to see better behaviors. So we're talking about on-task behavior, less disruptive, and hopefully fewer disciplinary incidents. Now, the enhanced PE approach. When we talk about enhanced PE, again, the focus is going to be on health and fitness. And, you know, we're kind of shifting away from that traditionalist that's just sports, knowing the rules, knowing that a basketball rim is 10 feet off the ground. We're going to shift the focus more towards health and fitness during our classes. Knowledge, skills, and confidence building activities. We want our students to gain confidence in their skills and abilities and have success when they're performing different activities in our lessons. Again, we want to get moderate to vigorous physical activity at 50% of the class time or more. And then we're looking at small-sided games versus large group games. We want to get away from the traditional, like, 10 on 10 or 15 on 15, 20. If you got 40 kids, 20 on 20 soccer. We want small-sided 3 on 3 games, 4 on 4, even 2 on 2 games that are going to promote more activity within those small groups.
Thanks, Tom. Now, Deb Vogel's going to get us started with our brief review of Webinar 1.
As we went through Webinar 1, we started talking about a standards-based continuum. And that continuum comes back to the big picture, which is everything should be standards-based. Hopefully you're using the Illinois standards. They are a little bit better, I think, and I think most people in Illinois think, than the national standards because they include in them the neuroscience. But when we start to do that, you need to make sure that you have a standards-based curriculum, a scope and sequence that's aligned vertically and horizontally, and standards-based assessments, and standards-based instruction, so the kids know what they're learning and why they're learning it, so that everything is just neatly done for you. And if everything is standards-based, then you can use any assessment that you have for your para.
Thanks, Deb. Another one of the key points we covered was how a standards-based curriculum helps and what it helps. So it provides a guide to organize curriculum, gauge student progress through assessments, clearly articulate what students are or should be learning in their PE program, and it builds equity by providing quality, consistent framework across all grade levels. We like this definition from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation of health equity, and you can see the graphic on the screen helps illustrate it. Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be healthier. This requires removing obstacles to health, such as poverty, discrimination, and their consequences, including powerlessness and a lack of access to jobs with fair pay, quality education and housing, safe environments, and health care. All right, so now we'd like to hear from you. We're going to launch a poll. So I'm going to read the question, and then we're going to launch the poll for your answers. So we want to know, does your school or district have a PE curriculum? Yes, no, or I don't know. So hold on one sec while I launch our poll. All right, it is now launched. Please go ahead and provide your answers. I'm going to be monitoring how many we've had respond. I'd love to get that up. Let's see here. We are at, 73%. That's good. Okay, we'll give you about 5 more seconds to get in your answers. And let's just get it. Can we get it to 80%? Okay, we're going to close. And I'm going to share our results. Let's see what we have going. So, okay, hold on. Let's see. All right, 64% of you do. That's great. 27% no, and 9% I don't know. So the good news is these webinars help to be that starting point or moving you forward on that spectrum. So with that, we are going to keep it moving. And now we have this interactive curriculum template that we're going to finish filling out with you. We'd like your help on this. So we started this in Webinar 1, and we are now going to complete it. So as you can see, we filled out the first section of the chart, and with you, we're going to do the assessments, activities, and then we have some resources for you. So just as a refresher, we were working with State Learning Standard 19 for specifically B1A and B1B, so those learning standards. And we were looking at first grade and ninth grade. So we're going to start with the first grade, and then Deb Vogel, who is going to be providing the examples for middle and high throughout the rest of our webinar, will take us through that ninth grade example. So for first grade, again, just to catch you up, 19B1A, understanding that spatial awareness and relationships to objects and people. So for our concepts and skills, these are things we want to pick out for each one in our template. We had personal space and general space. Our outcomes were demonstrating that difference between personal space and general space. I can statement. I can move with control in the playing area without bumping into people. So please go ahead now. This is where we start hearing from you. You can communicate with us through the chat box. What is an assessment you would do for first grade for 19B1A, personal space and general space? Give you a couple seconds to form your thoughts and type that into the chat box on your sidebar. And then just as a reminder, part of what is going to make this so great is hearing from you all, and it also is part of our CPDUs and being actively part of the webinar. So love to hear from you. Okay, so just as we're getting going, maybe this one will give an example to start, but assessments for that first grade level, let me just tap on this. One sec. Okay, so for this one, it was teacher observation. We were throwing around whether it would be peer observation, but for that first grade level, that would be too much to ask of first graders. So teacher observing is the assessment we do. So can anyone think of an activity that they might use for first grade if they're doing a lesson and you're concentrating on personal space and general space? You can use the chat box on your sidebar. All right, so we have hula hoop space game, move around with the hula hoop, held around the waist, and avoid peers while moving to music. And then we have another one with hula hoops. This is good stuff. Using a hula hoop and driving on the lines of the gym without bumping or crashing cars. That's great. Let's see what we had for ours. Let me just click off this. Oh, let's see. Have another one in. Having students move throughout the gym, moving a ball from one location to another. While doing this activity, they move most through general space without entering into the personal space of others. Those are all great. And feel free, Tom and Deb, if you have any comment on these. Oops, let's see here. So, well, okay, we'll just leave it. So for ours, we had partner tag, just a simple form of partner tag, and then a resource I'll pass along is we have the Get Fit and Flourish manual, and I'm going to go more into that in a second, but it's a great resource for different activities and lessons, enhanced PE ones. All right, let's move along to 9th grade. So here, Deb is going to take us through this example.
As you know, the 19 in itself is really all the skills that we teach and the movement patterns that we teach. And as we go up and get to middle school, high school, the depth of knowledge and the depth of skill that they should have moves up with them. And we talk about in 19B how to execute a basic movement pattern. And we're really talking about now not just personal and general space, but making space within a game or an activity. How do you actually get open? You know, how do you demonstrate the ability to get open and catch a pass during a game? And we know that kids get more excited about games when they know that people are going to involve them in the game. So they can say to themselves, I can move myself into a position that is open to catch a pass, and hopefully their teammates will give them to them. If we were going to look at this, how would you assess this? You can type that into your chat box.
And we'll read their answers out, Deb, like we did before when things come in. All right, peer observation or self-observation. Teacher observe, or again, peer observation. And same thing, so it looks like we're having the answers across the board, peer and teacher observation. I'll go ahead and put in what we had, and feel free to keep typing your responses if you have more to say. Student watches tape and analyzes performance. Anything further you want to say about that assessment, Deb?
Yeah, the reason that we used a tape was because anytime that you're going to do an assessment, and even if it's observation or what it is, you're going to need a rubric or some type of checkoff sheet. If you're doing a formative assessment, just during the unit, it could probably be a checkoff sheet. If it was going to be a summative assessment towards the end to show that they can really demonstrate their ability to get open, it would probably need to be a tape so that you have evidence of performance. What type of learning activities are you going to use to get them to be able to move to catch a pass? What activities would we use?
Okay, possibly use a checkoff during gameplay. Is the student moving to an open position on the playing field?
When you're thinking about activities that you could use to assess this, don't forget that you can assess skills during any activity. That's the nice part about a standards-based program. You know, like this one, we could find out if they were moving to an open space to catch a pass in a flag football game, in an ultimate frisbee game, in a basketball game. There's just a ton of what we do, and it doesn't matter which one of those we use to assess them.
We got an activity in any type of ultimate game style games.
Yep.
Small group student games, for example, 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. Small-sided games that have constant repetitions. In the small-sided games, students should have an opportunity to reflect with one another.
Good answers.
Mm-hmm. All right, I guess we'll see what we had. Poly spots passing balls.
It's just a matter of just what you guys have said is to use anything that you have to get them to go to a spot or move to a place. But they need to make sure that they have always the opportunity to practice what we've asked them to do.
Thanks, Deb. And the resource we were going to highlight for this was PE Metrics. This is a standards-based cognitive and motor skill assessment package that offers 130 K-12 assessments created by Shape America. All right, so with that, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Get Fit and Flourish manual. So this is a resource that is available for free. You can see the hyperlink there on iphionline.org. It is a resource manual that provides many examples of moderate to vigorous physical activity strategies. So I'll refer to that as MVPA going forward. It is geared towards the elementary level, and it has a variety of lesson plans and activities to increase MVPA, tips to minimize sedentary time, adapted PE strategies, suggested skill progressions for lessons, handouts. The lessons focus on the importance of team building and cooperative learning, and of course aims to enhance the amount of time spent in MVPA.
Sarah, I just wanted to say one thing about the manual and being with my middle school kids. I know you said it's geared towards elementary, but a lot of those activities that are in that book, I use as warm-up activities with my middle school kids, and they love them. So it's not, I mean, yes, it is geared towards elementary, whereas maybe it'd be a full lesson at elementary, but even high school, I think some of those games and activities would be great warm-up activities for kids as well.
That's a great point, Tom. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move a bit into the meat of this webinar, backwards design. So what is it? As you can see, many educators decide on the activities they'll teach and engage students in those before they're looking at the standard. So with backwards design, the standard is the starting point. And the process. There's 3 steps. One is identifying that student outcome. What do you want students to know and be able to do? Then it's determining how you will assess them as meeting those outcomes. And then designing the learning activities to make the outcomes happen. To talk a little bit more about assessments, I'm going to turn it back over to Deb.
I think it's really important that you understand that backwards design because I think a lot of people just try to fit their activities into a standard, and that usually doesn't work very well in terms of being able to assess the standards. So I would encourage you to start with the standard and then go through that and then finally get to an activity. But as we look at assessment, we know that especially in the era of para, where we're using assessments to show student growth, what we're talking about right here, tracking student progress, is probably going to be done with a formative assessment. It could be a quiz, it could be an observation, a peer checkoff, an exit slip. But what we're trying to do is to find out whether or not students are understanding what we're teaching them, what the standard that you're teaching them, and whether you're making progress in being able to master that and apply that later on. And we need to make sure that that's aligned with their objectives and the learning activity. Sometimes we expect kids to be able to do things, and the activity that we've chosen is one that we like, but it doesn't really match the objective or the outcome that we want. But also you need to understand that you need to measure and give students feedback of their learning continually. That's why the formative assessments become so important. Next slide, please. You can see here that there's a roadmap to this. You know, your formative assessments are basically, they're actually checks for understanding as you're teaching. Do they know what you want them to know? Can they do what you want them to do? And they should be showing growth. They should have enough learning opportunities so that they actually show growth in terms of their skill level or their knowledge level. And at the very end of the year, the end of units, wherever it is, what we're going to use for a main part of their grade would be a summative type test. If we've been going all along and looking at their growth, this should be pretty simple for them in terms of grading what they know or grading what they're able to do. But once again, in order for that to work, you have to have enough learning opportunities for every student, which is why that small-sided game, that small-sided activity is so important. And being able to differentiate different types of things for kids is going to be so important for them.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, now I will briefly just review the elements of a lesson plan. So once the student outcomes and assessments have been identified, it's time to create your lesson plan and activities. I'll note that we're going to go through all these components of a lesson plan, but not all lessons include all these things. It depends on what it is. The most important one is the standard. What are we doing today? It determines all else. Then you might have your intro and warm up. So it's preparing students for intense physical activity. In order to do that, they should engage in light aerobic physical activity. A best practice is engaging them in an instant warm up as they enter the space. It also can be an opportunity as a cognitive introduction to the lesson focus. For example, as students enter the space, they're instructed to dribble a basketball for 3 to 5 minutes. This could be a warm-up for a lesson focusing on dribbling as part of the basketball unit. Skill introduction, there the teacher is demonstrating the skill focus of the lesson, typically through guided practice that focuses on the learning cues of the skills. For example, teacher will demonstrate proper form of dribbling the basketball and focus on the individual parts of the skill. Head up, finger pads, push ball to the floor in an athletic stance. Skill practice. So then you're providing students with the opportunity to engage in activities related to the skill focus. This can take many forms, including a controlled direct instruction environment where students are practicing an individual skill in their personal space to engaging in games where they're using the skill. This should be the majority of a lesson as a best practice to allow students as many practice opportunities as time allows. Then you have your skill extension practice. So providing students learning activities that are varied and progressive. For example, if they were engaging in independent drilling practice as the skill practice activity, the extension could be a game like dribble tag, where they are adding in that locomotor element. Then you have the assessments, which is measuring students, measuring against the objective of the lessons. Deb talked about that. And that closure, summarizing the key points with the students to wrap up. So now we're going to do the interactive activity on backwards design. So you'll be participating in this, and we're going to practice creating a lesson plan that addresses the standards. So first of all, if you could go ahead and open the State Goal 19 handout that's in your sidebar. Give you a second to do that. See that in your sidebar in the handout section. And as you're doing that, for the activity, you're going to go ahead and pick a motor skill, such as overhand throwing or a movement pattern, like dribbling, and you're going to use that throughout the duration of this activity to design your learning activities. We also want you to go ahead and pick a grade that you're going to focus on. And now what we'll do is we'll go through the components of that lesson plan, and you will design your activity for your skill pattern and grade. And we will give you examples from lesson plans we've created along the way, along with our expert presenters kind of weighing in on what you're doing. So go ahead now. We'd like to know what movement skill or movement pattern you picked, as well as the grade level you'll be working on. So please go ahead and type those in the chat box, just so we're aware of what you'll be doing throughout the duration of this. And we'll give you a couple seconds to form your thoughts. All right, so we've got someone doing kicking in second grade. Oh, and yes, and as I mentioned, so we're going to do State Goal 19, specifically Learning Standard A, which we're going to look at in just a second, but with that in mind. Okay, so basketball dribbling for sixth grade, underhand serving in volleyball for sixth grade, kicking a moving ball for seventh, eighth grade. Okay, and I think that's some of the main people who are involved. So if you still have things to type, we'd still love to know. But with that, we are going to move on to our review State Goal 19. Keep it moving. We have someone doing second hand overhand throw. That's great. All right, so just very, very briefly, we went over this in the other webinar, but since we're doing it now here, just a very quick review of State Goal 19. So that overarching goal is for them to acquire movement and motor skills and understand concepts necessary to engage in MVPA. 19A is our specific focus. You can see that there, students demonstrating physical competency in a variety of movement skills and patterns. And the progression for the standard is going from demonstrating control when performing fundamental locomotor, non-locomotor, and manipulation skills to demonstrating control when performing sequences of these skills, to control when performing the sequences in selected activities, and at the high school level, demonstrating skills and knowledge in self-selected sports, creative movement, or work-related activities. And Deb mentioned this. Can't emphasize. Yes, go ahead.
Can you go back a slide for a second?
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who are in early elementary and late elementary, your main focus should be Goal 19. That's where they learn most of their skills. When you get into middle school, early high school, you do that at a moderate level. And by the time late high school comes, or middle high school to late high school comes, they should be able to show mastery of that skill and their ability to apply it in an activity.
Yeah, thank you. So the vertical alignment, just to always be aware of that, it's very important when creating lessons and units. need to be aware of students, where they are and where they're going. So in elementary school, like Deb said, foundational skills, application of skills, high school lifetime activities for those skills, and then moving into a physically active lifestyle. And then, yes, the second part of your handout is the expanded performance descriptors for 19A. So the expanded performance descriptors are specific statements and measures and tests that help you gauge student progress. Essentially, they're examples of ways you can show you're meeting the standard. You don't have to use them all, though, and you can tweak them.
That's the important part of it. The performance descriptors were written as examples. You're not expected to do them all. You're not expected to do them that way because that is going to be controlled by your equipment, your space, your time, all those different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we'll move into our activities. So that first step, of course, is the student outcomes. So we want you to start off trying. So with the activity and grade level you picked, what do you want students to know and be able to do for 19A? And please go ahead and type those into the chat box when you've got them ready.
Sarah, I just wanted to add in while they're typing those things in that a lot of times when you look at those descriptors can actually be learning targets for your classes, for those specific lessons that you are teaching, and you can use those descriptors to kind of help guide your learning outcomes or student objectives for given lessons as well.
Yeah, and just to clarify, we're looking for your student outcomes for this one. Would it work to do an I can statement, Deb? Or is that...
I can. You have grade level outcomes where you'll be saying in teacher language, what is it that I want them to know and be able to do? But ultimately, it should be in student language. And the student language would be, I can do this. That's how they know that they've mastered it, if they can do it. For instance, I heard somebody talk about kicking a ball. And so an outcome might be, I can kick an underhand ball that's thrown to me in a specific direction. And the I can statement for a student may be, I can kick a pitched ball to a target. That's how they would know whether or not they can do that.
All right, we got one here. Dribble a basketball with dominant and non-dominant hands while weaving around the cones and keeping the ball on their outside hand to protect the ball.
That's a great one.
We have another one, second grade. So this is for the second grade kicking. Students will be able to kick the ball around in the air or on the ground on demand.
I would ask the question for a student or for me, which is that a ball that's thrown to them or a ball that they'll drop out of their hands? How will they be kicking that? From a stationary ball that's just sitting there?
Stationary ball.
Okay, which is the absolute correct answer developmentally for that grade level. Got
another one. I think it might be sixth grade. Underhand volleyball serve. I can serve the volleyball over the net using an underhand serve while standing on the designated service line.
Okay, does it, and I don't have the answer to this, does it matter if they are stepping in opposition when they do that? Does it matter to you if the hand is a fist or an open hand, or whether or not they have a backswing or a follow through?
Got Got a couple more in here that we'll do. So 19 AC3, I can throw an object overhand forward while standing sideways and stepping with my foot. Let's see if I can find that was for second grade. I can kick a pass ball, keeping it on the ground while using an inside of the foot kick.
I think both of those to me sound good. I would just, if it's second grade, again, maybe having them mention something about stepping with the opposite foot's important, because from my own experience, and I'm sure many of the other PE teachers on here, I mean, I still have middle school kids stepping with their same foot. So I think getting them to identify at a young age, stepping with the opposite foot as being an important part would be something that we'd want them to include in their I can statements.
That's great. And I'll do one last comment for this, and then I will keep it moving. Someone said, I think in response to your thing about ball play, personally, I usually just hope we can keep the ball in play. So that was funny. All right, we're going to move along just for time. So some of our examples, so early elementary had respond to cues and demonstrate control when performing locomotor and manipulative skills. Pretty straightforward for 19A1A. And for middle, Deb, I don't know if you want to just kind of take us through that.
One of the things that is probably the easiest to put on a checklist, and it'll be easy for you, is it says here, demonstrate mastery of the critical elements of an underhand throw. If you design your rubrics so that it's based off of those cues and you keep using those cues with kids, that's pretty easy. Because then when you do your checklist, they do this cue, but they never do that cue. You know, they never bring their arm back, or they never release it at the right time, whatever that is. So it's important that if you use the critical elements in your teaching, they will become part of your rubric, and it's much easier to make your rubric. Aim underhand throws to a partner. Once again, we moved up a little bit to put throw and catch in here, that they use the proper catching. You know, once again, you know, if you start early teaching kids to catch balls, if they're below their chest with little fingers together and above their chest with their thumbs together, and you can use different size balls and different types of balls and different activities, and you'll be practicing this all the time.
Thanks. And anything to say for the high school example?
In high school, you know, very rarely do we throw underhand, I think. So we changed that. I would change that to an overhand throw, and we need to apply it in a game situation, you know, which might be in a flag football game, and I'm the quarterback and I have to throw the ball. So now I need to apply all those critical elements and get myself turned and make sure that I have my hip rotation, make sure I get my arm back correctly, follow through correctly, and I need to apply that while there's people running at me trying to take my flag. So that's an application.
Yeah, thanks. All right, with that, we'll move on to the next step, which is assessments. So go ahead and type in the chat box how you would assess the activity you picked for your grade level. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. So we got formative peer assessment. Let me see which one it was for kicking second grade. Okay, and then again for the kicking second grade, a summative assessment would be teacher observation.
Remember, whenever you're doing a peer assessment and even a teacher assessment and its observation, you need to have written out the key elements that you have either yourself or the kids looking for, so that they actually get feedback. Hey, you know, you do this pretty well, but you always miss this part of this skill. And that's what they need to work on so that they get the feedback that they need to get better at the skill.
Okay. Let me see if we got any more. We'll move along. Okay. For 6th grade underhand throw, teacher checklist for volleyball. And for basketball, 6th grade, I believe, I would observe the dribbling, but tell students prior to the drill what components I am looking for, somewhat of a checklist. All right, so with that, we will keep moving along. I think for time, we'll just highlight an example or two for each of these. So for elementary, she had a checklist, completing the overhead throw and observation of students applying their knowledge in that. Now moving on to middle school, same thing, very, let's see, so similar. We had the checklist and a peer assessment of students observing each other in their throws. And anything you'd like to say, Deb, about the high school example from the video? Maybe you touched on that.
At the throw and catch, we start to analyze a little bit more in terms of can they throw it and catch it correctly in a game situation. We're back down to applying what they learn, because we're assuming that if everything is done the way that it's supposed to, which is the vertical alignment, that by the time they get to high school that they have mastered these skills, especially the simple skills. And so, they need to show us that they can get their hands together and that they can make a throw to where somebody is going to and not where they're standing at.
Great. All right, so now we'll move on. Intro warm-up. You want to shoot out an example of intro warm-up? And maybe while you're talking, I'll do the elementary while you're forming your thoughts. Only for this, they have this game. Let's see here. Just so basically following different examples. The game is there are sailors in class, and they are practicing different kinds of sample instructions in order to get them into that. Go ahead and type in your intro warm-up if you have any examples.
As you're writing, I would say to you at the high school level, I virtually always did a dynamic warm-up with using the skills that we would be using in the activity for the day. So we would just take the skills and bring down the intensity of them so that they were throwing shorter distances, or they were throwing at 50%, not at 100% as fast as they could, or that type of thing. We would just change the intensity of what we were doing so it would become a dynamic warm-up.
Thanks. And I'm just going to read one warm-up, and then we are going to keep it moving because we have some great reflections and things we want to get to. So daily warm-up is running, followed by dynamic stretches that are non-sport specific. A different one for the basketball, I think that was 6th, 7th grade, was having them dribble in the gym at high, medium, and low levels with both dominant and non-dominant hands, as well as changing speeds. All right, so with that, I think I'm going to move it to our skill practice is our next one, just for time. So remember skill practice, that is where they're involved in actually some activity where they're doing that. Please just give us an example or two of skill practice for the activity you chose. We'll do the example while you're talking. So here we have students with this yarn ball, and they are practicing throwing it around with good personal space, and then having them place a poly spot with wall targets and practice aiming at those targets the proper throw. And then you do have them returning equipment to the designated area. That's a best practice for enhanced PE. And I have something here. Students partner up and serve the ball back and forth over a net, starting closer to the net and moving back as they become successful. Students are in groups of 2, kicking at a target on the wall. After each kick, the non-kicking partner should be giving feedback to the kicking partner on what critical elements they did and did not see. All right, so barring any comment from our experts, we are going to keep it moving. Oh, I have one more. Playing one-on-one basketball game where you dribble in a small area and try to dribble the goal line to score a point.
One of the things I would say, I was just a gym the other day where they were working on the dribbling and then shooting, is they actually placed hula hoops in their bleachers so that they were sticking out a little bit so every two kids could hit the basket. They just made them at different heights. But they had a chance to dribble and then shoot and do all those things, but they all got just a ton of opportunity to practice that.
And I was just going to add in that all the suggestions that came in through the chat box sounded great. And again, like keeping those introduction and skills-based activities very simple at the beginning. You want kids to be able to do the activity or at least warm up in the skill introduction and have success at it. So not giving them too difficult of a task to do at the beginning of class is important as well.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so now for time's sake, I want to turn over to Deb to give us some reflections on assessments, which is, of course, that important piece of the lesson activity planning.
I think the biggest thing when you reflect on assessments, Sarah, I think you can go to the next slide, if I remember right. Nope, never mind, go back.
Yeah,
fine. Is that you really do teach to the test. People that say don't teach the test, why would you not teach the test? Because the test is what you want them to do or be able to tell you or show you. So you should teach to the test. You need to make sure that when you write that observation or you write that observation form or your rubric, that it really does represent what you've taught and how you teach it and the words that you use. Because your words might be a little bit different than somebody else's. And so the kids get used to hearing things a certain way from you. And also understand that at a point, and you're going to come to it very quickly, is there are a lot of schools in Illinois that have already started, but they have gone to standards-based report cards. And your standards-based report cards will be based off of your standards-based assessments and your outcomes. You know, what is it that is the most important thing that I can have kids do or know in the level that I'm teaching? Keep it simple. You know, as we look at this, you really do need to make sure you teach the test and actually do go backwards. Start with your outcome. The rest of it will come. You know, start with what you need to have them be able to do or know, and then decide on what activity you're going to use to teach that. Try to get buy-in from other teachers in your district. Also, if your administrators, especially your curriculum people within your district or your school, backwards design has been around for a while, so that everybody, if you start talking about backwards design, they should be able to help you. They should be able to support you in this. And one of the things you're going to find out is the more you go through the process is the important part. Because once you start teaching with standards in mind, you really do start to understand it, and the kids start to understand why they're expected to do something. You should always be able to tell students what they're going to learn today and why they need to learn it. There's got to be a reason to learn something, because we know that just having stuff out there to just do it doesn't make any sense.
Thanks, Deb.
Develop your scope and first. Whoa. Develop your scope and sequence first. You know, what is it that we need to have them do it at kindergarten and first grade, then second grade, then third grade, because it should go up, differentiated by learning bands or grade bands. So that's where you need to start going.
Okay, thanks, Deb. And then Tom, did you have some reflections on the alignment process?
So when we talk about looking back at our alignment process, we want to start off by developing a scope and sequence that aligns with our exit standards for each grade level. Again, we're going to use the scope and sequence to develop curriculum that's based on standards and related outcomes. We want to determine appropriate ways to assess your grade level outcomes. And, you know, if possible, when you're doing these things, try to get everyone at the table. You know, having reps from every grade level is important for ensuring vertical alignment and awareness. You know, when we're working with districts, it's most often small group intensive work with teachers. We have a series of day-long sessions where they come together and fill in templates over the course of at least several weeks. You know, we have time in between our sessions to go back and reflect on how things are working. It doesn't have to be done this way, but, you know, again, it works well for ensuring progress. And it's a process. It's going to take time and attention. And in the long haul, hopefully all that time and hard work, if it's done properly, will pay off. And then always, you want to make sure you're assessing your curriculum. You want to possibly, you know, we can introduce you to PCAT. That's a tool you can use and a little bit later. Again, those are all things that are going to help you when developing your curriculum. You should be determining appropriate ways to assess your grade level outcomes. And then lastly, you want to be designing learning activities to meet those outcomes. Consider your unique situation, school culture, and teaching environment. So when it comes to implementing and continuing the implementation, it's important to get everyone to buy in. You want your teachers in your district to buy in, and your administrators to buy in, your community to buy in. You want to collaborate with others. You know, PE is just as important as every other subject. We got to make sure we keep that in mind when we are pushing our curriculum forward as well. Have the students be advocates for you. You know, have them talk up your programs, especially at the elementary level. You know, kids love PE. You know, let the students talk for you. Let them be a voice for you. As far as the implementation goes, it does take time. It's a slow process. I'm going to talk here in a second about what we did here in Oak Park, and I'll kind of give you an idea of the timeline it took us to develop ours. But in the end, you know, you're going to learn the material. If you put in the time, like as in anything, the more time you put into it, the more well-versed you are, the more you're going to sound like an expert when you share that information with your administrators, parents, and other PE teachers. So that's important as well. Don't get overwhelmed. It is a little bit of an overwhelming process. I'm not going to lie. You're going to get frustrated at points. But again, if you take it one step at a time and kind of make sure you get the right people on board, it can help guide you through the process a little bit easier. And then lastly, let the process start changing how you deliver your information to your students. Again, we want to go with standards-based instruction, and if you're doing things the right way, it is going to somewhat change your delivery of information to those students as well. So going into my real-life example, I was the department chair for Oak Park School District 97 from 2014 to 2016, and the state revised our learning standards in 2014, and we thought that would be a good time to update our curriculum since it had not been updated since 1991. So it had been a while, and it was needing a little bit of a makeover. So what we did is we have 8 elementary schools in our district, 2 middle schools. There's basically 1 PE teacher per elementary school. At both middle schools, we have about 4 PE teachers. And the first thing that I did as department chair was to kind of put together our team. You know, I invited everybody to be a part of the team. When it was all said and done, I think I had about 4 elementary school teachers and 2 middle school teachers as part of the team in revising the curriculum. The next thing we started to look at was creating our vision and mission, and a mission statement. A lot of times your mission statement is going to be something that is kind of tied to your district's vision. So we tried to look at our vision statement for District 97 as a whole and align it with our mission statement for physical education as well. The next thing we started to do, which was probably the most time-consuming aspect of it, was creating the scope and sequence. And we aligned our standards to NASB and ISB. And what we did is, when we created our scope and sequence, we created when those skills were being introduced, when they were being practiced, and then ultimately being applied. So as we looked through every standard in the NASB and aligned it with our Illinois state standards, what we then did was, in Oak Park, we only have a 2-day-a-week program for our elementary kids. So in our K through 5, we had to kind of go through the standards and see what was unique to our kids, what we felt was most important for our students in a 2-day-a-week program to accomplish. So we kind of were able to pick out and choose which of those we would do. Then we would go in and create rubrics, assessment rubrics to go along with assessments at the end of grade 2, and as well as for grades 4 and 5. And then after selecting those standards and going through which standards we were going to cover, that's when we kind of developed our curriculum and units and what units we were going to teach, and aligned them and put them in with the standards as well. Again, when it was all said and done, this was about a 1.5-year process. We met about, I would say, 5 or 6 times over the summer for maybe 2 hours each time. We then spent department meeting times the following year. And as it is constructed now, you know, it's never going to really be a totally set document. We reassess every year. We go back and we look at things, we change things. One of the things coming up that we are looking at doing is utilizing the PCAT tool. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, there are challenges. You know, there are times when you get frustrated. We've had a lot of turnover at the administration level with different new curriculum instructors coming in and asking us to change things, or they have different visions than the previous person. So that can be a frustrating piece. But again, as a department, we've kept our focus on, you know, providing our students with the best instruction possible and continuing to look at our instruction and curriculum and tweaking it as needed to provide the best learning for our students.
Thanks, Tom. That was great. Okay, so just to wrap us out, just some few resources for you. You can see them here on the slide, but the PCAT, the Physical Education Curriculum Analysis Tool, something you can use to analyze your curriculum, just like it sounds. It is based on the Shape America standards, not Illinois specific, so keep that in mind. CATCH, Coordinated Approach to School Health, is a subscription program. It gives you access to a PE program that is aligned to enhance PE concepts, K through 8. It is aligned with the whole school, whole community, whole child model. We went over Get Fit and Flourish. Open is a series of activities built on Shape America's national standards and grade level outcomes. And then PE Metrics, we talked about that, the assessments package. Just so you're aware, Pump Up PE is this professional development program IPHI has for PE teachers and curriculum staff. It is mainly a day-long training for PE teachers on how to get those moderate to vigorous movement levels up in your classes, aligning curriculum to revised state learning standards on physical development and health, and administering fitness tests. You can see here there's 5 reasons to attend. You will come out of it seeing real results, strengthening your curriculum, meeting those state PE standards, maximizing movement time, and supporting students, supporting lifelong fitness. It does have proven results. Teachers who go through this program, it was independently evaluated and found that students or teachers that went through it had increased capacity and confidence to implement PE requirements. And when in combination with other types of professional development, they did see movement levels go up in classes. So with that, I know we're near the end of our time. We can maybe hang on for another minute or two if you have questions.
There's one question that has come through the chat box. Is there a way to get the PE Metrics book for free? Deb or Tom, do you know?
Not that I know of. It's a human kinetics book.
Yes, I am unaware as well.
I would try to go through your curriculum person, or if you're a media person, librarian, whoever that is in your building, if they have a professional library in your school, they should be able to get it for you.
Great, thank you.
I would say in our district, the procedure we would go through in ordering or obtaining that would be going to the department chairperson and having that department chairperson speak to our curriculum director and explain why the need for the book and see if they would order it for us.
Okay, and it doesn't look like there are any other questions coming in, but we'll stay on for one more minute just in case, and everyone else, it looks like is saying, no questions, thank you. So,
Okay.
hold on 10 more seconds if you have final questions.
And as we're wrapping up, feel free to type those in, but just as a reminder, you do need to complete the ISB evaluation. It is in your sidebar. If you want the CPDU, you can email that back to me. I'll make sure I have your IEIN number. For those who listen after the fact, there's also a signed affidavit. And if you have other questions that come up, you can always reach out. My email's on the screen. If we don't know the answer, we can route you to the expert who does. So we're always here as a resource for you. All right, so with no other questions, thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and wrap up our webinar. We will send out a link to the recording, and thank you for joining us, and we'll let you know about any future learning opportunities. Have a good rest of your day.